Welcome to the 6th ever episode of the Movement Revisionist Podcast, where we help redefine human movement one episode at a time. Today we got a very special guest, Dan Allison. I've known you for, I can't believe it's
maybe 4 years now, maybe?
I don't know.
I don't even know.
Time is flying by.
It is.
It's been a little, last time I saw you didn't have a beard, so.
Bringing it back.
This is a nice little touch, nice little added value for me personally. But I wanted to have you on to discuss, well, especially for my patient population, I see a lot of desk workers, people that don't train on a regular basis, and as a trainer, how to kind of start or intro into strength training. But before we get into those concepts, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah, sure. Ask me if you want me to go deeper in any part of it.
Yeah.
Been a trainer for, let's see, how old am I now? 37? Since I was like 21 years old, so about 15 years.
All right.
Or no, it was the math on that, 16 years. And played sports, every sport growing up, hockey, baseball, football. Was always around the athlete scene or getting ready to get into a season. Fell in love with the training side of things for sports, back in 8th grade. Had some really good coaches that taught us how to do things in the weight room and speed training and all that. My dad was also a coach. He was a hockey coach. So having that influence, I always loved sports, always loved training for sports, always loved helping my teammates train for sports. And then, it was kind of a natural transition after high school. Then I went to college at Western Michigan, went into exercise science. At that point in time, thought I wanted to work with, college football, college hockey. Went through the program there, interned, all that. Decided I wanted to go another direction, working in the private sector, and got into what I'm doing now, working with, athletes, people who are getting into strength sports, and then, just people who are, general population, like you said, people that are working at a desk all day. Maybe they've never been active before. Maybe they were active a long time ago, playing sports growing up. Maybe they're coming off a hip replacement, knee replacement, and are seeing us after physical therapy, to make sure that their training is going well and they, don't have issues again.
Well, you teed that up nice, because the reason I wanted to have you on for this topic is because I know how diverse of populations you train. And then those of you watching, we're in the heart of where you're currently training in Omnivo. And the big thing is I've referred a lot of patients to you in the past, but I love knowing no matter what that patient is and what their activity level, you've seen it all before, you know exactly where to kind of pick up the ball and run with it, which has been an awesome transition for just that rehab to performance that we love to preach, especially where we're at Reach. So Dan, let's dive in a little bit more specific. So if we have someone we already mentioned the desk worker, so we'll stay on that population. Someone who's interested in being more active, or maybe they were active back in their high school or college years and they want to, get back up to that. What are some good tips or intro 101 things that people should know?
Yeah, okay. I think the biggest thing would just be finding a way to get started. So I don't think there's any one particular exercise or training program or, gym that you need to train at. I love to train you here, but even if that's just getting more active at your house or at your job, just finding a spot to start. Getting started again or getting started for the first time is going to be the most difficult part. Because we got momentum on our side. Once we get started, we can keep that consistency going, but it's not going to matter if we don't start. None of the perfect exercises don't matter if we don't get started. So as far as those entry points go, I think if you're the person listening here, if you've got injuries or something you need to get looked at before you get into a program, see your doctor, see someone like Mitch, see someone who can kind of assess you and see maybe what some guardrails for you might be as far as do this, don't do that. Other than that, you got your medical clearance to get going. Just finding that first thing that's going to make sense for you. So if you're someone who enjoys more outdoor activity and you like walking and running, then I'd suggest you start with some walking. You know, if you're someone who wants to pursue strength training, you know, then get started with some strength training. Maybe you know a couple exercises already, start with those. You don't know exercises, come hire a trainer like us or find someone good for online training, because there's a lot of that now too, and, you know, have someone help you find that entry point.
I think the big thing is entry point. And one thing that I love that you touched on is trying to start somewhere where you already have a passion. So if you like being outside, then don't try looking at an underground gym. It might not be your cup of tea.
You may like it at some point, but let's start where you're, I don't want to say comfortable, but let's start where your interest is.
Yeah.
You know, if you're someone who is interested in the weight room, you want to make the weight room the cornerstone of your program, then great. If you don't, then that's fine too. Start with what you're interested in with the outdoor stuff or cardio on the treadmill or bike. And then, you know, let's slowly build in some strength training into your routine.
Yeah, start where you're comfortable, but know the biggest thing is just starting. And we both know whether it's rehabbing from an injury or progressing through strength training or whatever their sport is, it takes consistency.
Yes.
So if we can get our foot in the door, whether that's just, hey, let's walk a couple blocks this evening, you know, do that a couple times a week. All right, now that's too easy, then start to look for that higher level. But I think it's important to note that everybody's starting point's not the same. You know, just because someone's like, oh, I just picked up running randomly and you should try it too. You know?
Yeah, you don't need to be, what's his name is really popular, David Goggins. Like, okay, cool story, but like, you don't need to try to be like him.
Yeah.
There's no reason to.
No, I mean, he's the point.
You can use him as motivation and stuff, but like, you don't need to make that your standard for cardiovascular activity if you're not already doing something. You know, to that same token, you don't need to do what a competitive powerlifter or bodybuilder is doing your first week in the gym or really at all. You just need to do something and get started with it, you know. Yeah. Whether that's I would rather you start with 5 minutes of dedicated activity rather than thinking you need to go 2 hours or 3 hours. Start with something that you can do, because we can always add on. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew, and then that shame starts setting in, and that guilt of, oh, I didn't get it done. I said I was going to get 2 hours in, didn't happen. I got an hour in. Rather than looking at it like, hey, that was a victory of an hour activity, you know, you're sitting there beating yourself up. So plan for less than you think you need.
Yeah.
And dominate that, and then you can start building from there.
And we've been guilty of it, especially before we knew what we know now, is everybody wants to go 0 to 100. You know, whether they're looking at, well, hopefully they're just looking at being more active, but usually people want more specific goals like losing weight or whatever it may be. That whatever your goal is, it starts with that first step. And as we just create that repetitive pattern, then your path gets a little bit more clear. So like I mentioned, walking as an example. Say now you're walking 3 days a week. Well, now that that's easy for you, maybe I do want to start strength training. Your journey and where you're starting is most likely not where you're going to be 6 months or even a year from then. Right?
Exactly. It's like that 5-minute walk every day after a month turns into a 20-minute walk. And then the 20-minute walk turns into now you're doing push-ups and bodyweight squats for 10 minutes afterwards. And, you know, before you know it, you've got a much more full routine. Yeah.
Now, do you have any recommendations for someone who wants to start getting into strength training and they don't necessarily know where to start? Or is it as simple as, if you don't know what you're doing, seek a professional?
Yeah, if you're just really stuck because there's going to be so much stuff out there online as far as, oh, you should do kettlebells, you should do barbells, you should do body weight, you should do dumbbells. And it's like, okay, they're all really the same thing at the end of the day. You know, if you're having a hard time with that decision or where to start, that's where hire somebody. You know, even if that's just consulting one time of like, hey, where should I start? Yeah,
well, at least then you can weed out what you're not interested in. Because I think the big thing is there's so much out there, especially, you know, with social media now, where we're just seeing everything, whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but there's so many different aspects of general fitness or just fitness.
Sure.
But just finding that point for you, and just because someone has 1 million followers doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, it's like barbells can work great, dumbbells can work great, kettlebells can work great, body weight can work great. You could just do one of them, never do any other ones, and make great progress. You could mix it up. It really doesn't matter. The body doesn't really know the difference from the different tools. The body knows the stimulus it's getting from the tool.
Yeah.
So pick something that you can commit to get started. If you're not sure where to start, get with someone who can kind of guide that process in a pretty logical manner. And how do you find someone like that? Find someone where you can actually see customer reviews, I would say.
Yeah.
Because nowadays as a trainer, you can kind of market and lie about a whole lot of stuff that maybe you're not actually qualified for. So say, look at those customer reviews, read those Google reviews, talk to people that have worked with a certain trainer, and then make your choice from there. That should kind of help.
Yeah, if you're out in the deep end and you don't know exactly, that's a good floaty to grab onto.
Yes. On the other end, I would say watch out for the trainer that assesses you to death. If you really have some pain and some discomfort, go see someone like Mitch, to get looked at, go see a physical therapist. But look out for these trainers who are trying to diagnose you with all these different things that may not even be real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, unfortunately, we see that, which there are a lot of knowledgeable trainers out there, but just like I know a lot about training through my own personal experience, I stay in my lane. That's where I consult someone like you or just refer.
Well, that's where a lot of trainers don't stay in their lane and they try to diagnose all this and that. And it's not to say don't help someone if you know something, but if they're trying to restrict everything you're doing in training and until you're ready or until you're fixed, like I would probably turn the other way. Now, on the other hand, if they should listen to you on that and just say, hey, I'm going to take you down the road to my guy Mitch to assess you and see what's really going on in your hip or your back, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then someone like Mitch can communicate with a trainer like me or whoever you're working with and say, hey, so-and-so's got X, Y, and Z going on. Let's go and take this approach with training them, or vice versa. Hey, this person really does have something wrong with them. We're going to go get some help for them, and they'll be back to training in 6 weeks.
We might have to put a bookmark on things, but well, the same thing goes when if you're seeing a clinician and you love powerlifting or strength training in general. Oh, you have back pain? What? You're deadlifting? Are you dumb? Like, you should run the other way right away, because that person clearly doesn't know anything about rehab and exactly what it takes to deadlift, whether it's whatever your goals are, but increasing your performance and not limiting certain activities.
Well, I just think if the conversation only goes that deep, there's a problem, right? Like that could be the start of it, of like, okay, like, holy crap, you got a lot going on in your back. Let's maybe be hesitant at deadlifting, but let's keep this conversation going
short term
and find out if, hey, is this someone who does this for a sport? Is this kind of like their passion? Okay, let's look at graded exposure. Let's look at how can we get you back to doing this?
Yeah. A lot of times I meet patients that, whether it was their primary care, another chiropractor, usually it's not the physical therapist, population, luckily, where, wait, you had this back pain at one point in your life and you were also doing this activity. Well, you might have just had an active injury at that time, but it doesn't mean you should limit a certain activity, especially if it's one you're passionate about. But there's always, it depends, but that's where seeing a professional that's going to actually assess the true injury and go over how to get back to that point in a step-by-step progression.
Yes.
If someone's like, you have knee pain and you're running, well, stop running. Well, I mean, that's the easy kind of generalist way.
But it's like if they're a runner, that's a different conversation.
Exactly.
If maybe they're misled in thinking that's their best way to losing fat and they're not maybe built to run great, maybe you are saying that. But, in context of this person enjoys running, they're a runner, it's like the conversation should be, how can we get you back to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, whether it's a treatment plan with someone like myself or a coaching plan with you, there has to be the ultimate goal in mind based off of the individual and what they want to do, right? So if someone hurt themselves doing a certain activity, well, if you didn't even like that activity to begin with, then okay, let's try to find something.
Yeah, then we shouldn't have been doing it anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where we can get into it's hard to throw generalizations, whether it's coaching or treating or rehabbing in general. It always depends, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point. And to the audience out there, the Gen Pop, let your goal be your goal. Like if another red flag for trainers, like if they've got these goals set for you, but it doesn't match up with anything you want, that's a problem.
Yeah, or another one you could do is if you were recommended a certain trainer for someone, see how similar your programs are to that same person, especially if they're a totally different demographic. That could be someone just doing the same routines over and over and over again.
Yes.
Which could be good for the right
It's
person.
all contextual. That, like, I would argue that for some people and argue it against for others. You know, again, it's all goal dependent, person dependent.
That's where it's hard not to get into the weeds with a topic like this. I really think it just boils down to you or the individual. And if you're not active now, you just have to find that activity that's going to, get you off the couch or get you off the desk chair or whatever it may be. Whether that's just, walk, if you work from home, walk around your house on your lunch break. Like it could be that easy to start building an activity and a routine. And eventually that could start to progress, but that's where you just have to find that entry point.
Yeah, or like I've got some clients that I do programming for that they own their own business and they don't quote unquote have much time, but they have a kettlebell in their office and they do 10 minutes of whatever exercises, we deem appropriate. Maybe some marching or maybe some kettlebell swings, whatever it might be. But yeah, again, it doesn't need to be an hour.
Well, that's the big thing too, is when it comes to, hey, I want to be more active and want to be more fit. What's one of the number one excuses I probably guess you hear? Exactly.
But you got to make time, no matter who you are. If you're a CEO, if you're, lowest level employee, no one has all the time in the world. Everyone who's getting it done makes time with the schedule they have.
Well, the important thing to note is every single person has the same amount of it.
Yeah.
So if other people are getting it done, and you can look up to examples of people who are generally busier, whether they're business owners or whatever it may be, you got to lock it in if you want to get to those goals.
Especially if it's health and fitness, like you follow Alex Hormozy, he does like business stuff.
Oh yeah.
So he talks about when he had his gym launch business going, talking about people signing up for fat loss type training, and he's like, the best time for you to start is when you are your busiest, because now that's going to teach you how to manage these healthy habits when life is at its craziest, and now like you're going to be able to do that just all the time. So I think we need to look at things that way too, of, hey, let's not wait until the kids graduate from high school. I mean, maybe there's some financial sides to it, but as far as just getting started, hey, let's not wait till the kids are out of school, or let's not wait until work settles down. Like, let's find 10 minutes, let's make 10 minutes, let's make a half an hour. Let's, schedule that like a meeting that you have with your employees or whatever it might be, and get it in there if it's that important.
I like that. I have heard that quote before, but it's a mindset shift. And you really have to shift your mindset if you're serious about wanting to be more active.
Well, that's the thing. If you want to be different, you have to do different things.
But if you boil it down, if you have, 3 kids, you got to take them to this practice, that practice. Well, that's the best time to learn health and fitness, because you're probably not going to be that busy at any other point in your life.
Well, I think it's right there. Like, we look at that as automatically, I can't. It's like, okay, you got those 3 kids, taking them to 3 different practices. Well, how about that practice that you're staying at and waiting an hour? You pull your bike out of the back of the van and you ride your bike around the baseball field. You go for a walk with your headphones on. You do some push-ups. Like, we've got a dad that drops his daughter off here for training, pulls his bike out, and he rides Hines Park for an hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no charge for a gym membership on that. And you got an hour of work in.
It literally can be that simple.
Yes.
And that's where I kind of brought up social media before. Just, I think we can look at other people doing things and assume that it's that complicated to start at, well, for our example, health and fitness. But you could literally carve out the time. What are you already doing? When do you ever sit? Whenever you're looking at your phone for an extended period of time, that is your go-to where you could start being more active.
Well, just pull up your phone and look at your screen time, and you're going to feel really guilty about saying that you don't have a half an hour, you don't have 10 minutes.
Oh, you know what's been a game changer is I did a time audit where I was tracking just not necessarily me on my device, but just what I'm doing in general.
Yeah.
You know how much time you can find
Yes.
when you're actually paying attention to it?
Yes.
So that's something where if time's a big factor, literally write down what you're doing every 15 minutes in a day and you'll be surprised.
It'll just
at how
bring
much.
some awareness that maybe you don't have already. You know, maybe a couple aha moments, and maybe you see a couple spots where it's like, okay, I could definitely dedicate 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. You know, and then that starts snowballing into a much bigger, more consistent routine over time.
We might not have the knowledge of where to start. We mentioned how time could be a restraint, but really it's more of a mindset shift. I think the other thing people think about when starting health and fitness journeys is the cost. Not necessarily from a time perspective, but from a financial perspective. We kind of touched on a couple free things you could do, but what would your thoughts be on someone who says, oh, I just can't afford it?
Well, I mean, I would say, can you afford can you afford to die earlier? Can you afford to die 10 years sooner, not be there for your family? Can you afford to be moody all the time because you're not taking care of yourself? You know, so I mean, I put it back at you that way. I would also be supportive in saying that, okay, like, it is a little bit of an investment to hire a trainer or to get a gym membership, but that is what it is. It's an investment. It's not an expense. It's something that's going to help you. It's going to allow you to make more money at your job if you own your own business, be a better employee. It's going to make you think a little bit better, you know, all that good stuff.
Less stress.
Or, you know, and maybe, you know, you've got your certain price point, and there's different trainers, different price points out there. So, you know, maybe you're looking at a group class option that's a little bit less expensive, you know, versus a one-on-one training. So, I would say there's options for really whatever financial bracket you're working in. And if you can't afford coaching, then, you know, if you've got Instagram or you've got Facebook or Twitter, maybe you're not hiring a coach, but you're taking what we're saying on just start being active. And maybe you're just kind of following along, you know, a reputable trainer's advice on Instagram of maybe they've got a program template out there or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
for all the bullshit there is online, there is a lot of good stuff too.
Right.
So I would say that of just kind of look at, hey, well, what else are you spending money on that you don't need to, that's not making you better? Are you looking at, you know, your fitness, you're hiring your trainer and your gym memberships and all that, and you're buying your programs and your nutrition plan and all that, your chiropractic visits, are you looking at that as an investment, or are you looking at that as a waste of money? If your mindset is not thinking that's an investment, then, you know, how much self-respect do you actually have for yourself, and how much do you actually value how healthy you are? You know, and if that's not for you, then that's not for you. Maybe you don't have that connection there, that your physical activity and how you eat and live and all that is directly going to affect how healthy you are in the long term.
Well, and it might not be a priority for that person at that point in time.
It may not. You know, for some people it takes a life scare to wake them up to that. And it just is what it is. And it's not too late at that point in time. We still want to help those people.
Well, and unfortunately, that's the circumstances that get someone. Really could be a blessing in disguise for most people, especially, you know, if you had an unexpected heart issue in your 50s, 60s. Sometimes that big scare
might get you to eat a salad.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, or might get you to sign up for the gym.
Now, and it's easy for us to say when you don't have those quote-unquote issues, well, they don't happen overnight, so they're developing right now. But we try to get ahead of these things before they get into that.
You know, and yeah, I've not had a heart attack yet. We'll see how that goes. But speaking from the standpoint of, we've seen this with adults, we've seen this with people who are getting their health together now, but it took them getting as fat as possible for their liking to flip that switch and say, fuck it, like, I'm going to make a change. You know, and often that's what it takes. To be ruthlessly honest, it takes most people being disgusted with themselves before they're willing to make a change, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
You know, so
Absolutely.
some of you, it's just going to take you letting yourself go to a point where it's really fucking uncomfortable and really fucking unmanageable with how out of shape you are or how weak you are until it kind of connects.
Yeah. And that's where you could use that as motivation. That's where, even with someone like myself who treats pain for a living, well, usually I'm meeting somebody when they're in pain.
Yeah.
Every now and then someone comes to me, they're like, hey, I kind of got this thing. I don't want it to develop into something, but that's like 2%, if
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need that active pain, whether that's emotional, physical, to really drive you to make those
Take
changes.
that action. Yeah.
So that's where, even if you're listening to this and you just can't find that motivation, most likely you're going to hit that breaking point eventually. But know, if you can be cognizant in that moment to be like, oh, this is the bottom. All right, we can only go up from here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you can't look at yourself in the mirror when you're naked, just, getting out of the shower or whatever, it disgusts you, then it's probably time to make a change.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
I know it's kind of crazy sounding, but it's true.
Well, and that's where I know everybody wants everything sugar-coated nowadays, but we're both in our respective professions because we want people to live as healthy and as active as possible. And if you don't find that as a priority, you shouldn't be shocked if you start developing
That's the
these
thing.
things later in
And
life.
there's a lot of people like I talk to a lot of people that they don't give a shit if they live past 70, past 60. That's fine. It's all a personal mindset choice. You know what I mean? So we're here for those people that want to, try to extend their life and live as healthy as they can. And, everyone's got a little bit different idea and standard of what that is for themselves. And, who are we to say one's right, one's wrong?
No, I don't think there is perfect out there.
Yeah.
And usually the people that try to strive for perfect, whoever's following them in their footsteps or trying to, well, they fall off and just end up right back where they were because it's an unrealistic expectation.
Sure. Kind of the idea of like you're talking about looking online. Oftentimes you're comparing your day 1 to someone's day 10,000.
True.
It's like, okay, well, this person's on day 10,000. They're doing this advanced looking thing because they've worked their way up to that. If you saw them on day 1, they probably didn't have a video up of that, So keep that in mind too.
Absolutely.